ones from past decades are every bit as interesting, in my opinion, as the recent ones. And one report I'd like to begin with comes from Metuchen, New Jersey. This is from 50 years ago this month, Michael. A woman, an adult female, writes that in 1968, she was a young lassie of 13 years of age. She was getting ready for school, and she started drawing a bath in their bathroom at the family home. And she went to close the blinds in the bathroom, and she looked out in the distance, and hovering over nearby trees was a distinctly disc-shaped craft moving very slowly. While she was watching it, to her great amazement, a second one came from the opposite direction, and the two of them hovered there for a few seconds, and then suddenly, like marble being shot out of a slingshot, they both shot up vertically and disappeared from her sight. Very, very interesting report. It's
yes.
I've corresponded with the woman, and she's very sane and sober-minded, very serious person. The next report I'd like to share with... Go ahead.
This was a report that happened back then, but was it just recently reported? Is that what you're saying?
Just 3 or 4 days ago, I received it.
Which follows the idea that if they have reports out there, that you still want to hear them.
Absolutely. The reports that occurred in the 40s, 50s, and 60s are every bit as interesting and valuable as reports that happened yesterday, last night. So
yeah,
that's part of the reason I like to talk about these past sighting reports, is to let people know we're interested in them. The next one I'd like to share with our audience comes from 1977, from the city of Sacramento in California. Two brothers. One of the brothers writes the two of he and his brother were sitting on top of a chicken coop, waiting to pounce on a raccoon that had been stealing their chicken eggs. They were probably trying to decide which one of them was going to pounce first for that raccoon, but as they were sitting there, suddenly everything seemed to go quiet, and they looked up above them, and there was a craft. I think it was a disc-shaped craft or a round craft, just glided in directly above them. They estimate that it hovered there for about 5 or 10 minutes or so, and he had never, ever reported this incident to another UFO authority, such as the National UFO Reporting Center. So I was particularly glad to get that case. The next report I'd like to share is a really interesting one, and this comes from just last week, Michael.
Really?
It comes from July 23rd. I think that's Monday of last week, so less than a week ago, 6 days ago. A young couple were camped at Cape Mears State Park, which is just on the west side of Tillamook Bay in northwestern Oregon. And at 4:50 a.m., they know the exact time because they looked at their watches, they were both awakened at the same time by a very strange, loud sound. They describe it as being sort of an animal sound. Well, the husband got out. His wife said, "I think you ought to go check that out, honey." And so the husband got out of the tent, and he looked out over the ocean. They were camped on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And he looked down towards the water, and he saw two orange globes, self-luminous, distinctly orange. He estimated they were about the size of a basketball, or maybe a little bit larger. And he called to his wife. She came out and joined him, and the two of them stood there and watched these two spheres for a very short time before suddenly a third one appeared next to the first two. at first they thought they were small boats that were having difficulty on the ocean and were about to go on the rocks below their feet. But it turned out that these objects just started moving slowly out to sea, then accelerated, stopped, accelerated again, and disappeared from their sight, headed south. Very, very interesting report.
Yes, and these were orange again, you said? Fireballs or globes?
Distinctly orange. I don't know whether they were transparent or translucent or opaque. They don't address that issue in their report, but very, very high-quality report, and both husband and wife submitted very nice, well-composed reports, so I suspect they're very serious-minded about it. And if we have time, I'd like to share one more report. This one comes also from Oregon. I don't mean to be picking on folks in Oregon. It just turns out that way tonight. On Wednesday of this past week, that makes it the 25th, at 6:45 a.m., a gentleman writes that he was driving to work. He was going from Newburgh to Wilsonville to get on Interstate 5 and drive up to his place of work. And as he was driving towards Ladd Hill Road, which is just on the west side of I-5, he saw two humanoid creatures walking beside the highway. Now, this is a rural highway that has no sidewalks, so you wouldn't expect to see people out walking, particularly at 6:45 in the morning.
Right.
And they were very tall, very slender, and they had very tight-fitting uniforms, form-fitting uniforms that they were wearing, and they had black, very peculiar-looking black boots. They were both dressed identically. And as he went by them, he was so taken by this, he wanted to look at their faces to see who they were. And just as he got up to them and turned his head to look at them, they both turned their faces away from him, almost as if they had read his mind. They did not want him to see the faces. And
my goodness.
It could be a case of aliens on the ground. We'll never know.
Yes.
But I share this case in part because if we have any listeners down in that part of Oregon, if they happen to have been driving to work at that hour of the morning on the 25th, I believe it was, we would very much like to hear from them. But those are examples of the many reports that come to the National UFO Reporting Center, principally thanks to listeners like yours who take the time and trouble to write out written accounts of the strange things that people are seeing.
Well, that is very impressive, Peter. We definitely are getting the word out here to all the listeners across the United States, especially, by the way, our truckers out there who listen to our show and download it even and take it with them late at night. So I'm hoping that the truckers out there will keep their eyes open for anything kind of tall, slender aliens walking alongside of the highway or the road. Did the gentleman happen to mention in his report what color these things looked like? Was it a uniform of silver or white? Or
they had, I think he says, green, tight-fitting uniforms, black boots, calf-length boots that reached up to mid-calf, I think he said in his report. And they were also wearing a peculiar-looking silver vest of some variety. Now, I can't rule out, Michael, that these guys might have been working their way home from the bar. They might have been identical twins. I don't know, but they were very tall and very thin. And this guy said he's never seen anything like it in his life. And the fact that the two walkers two strollers turned their faces distinctly away from him just as he turned to look at them seems significant, in my opinion.
Yes, and at the same time, it sounds like in unison they did that. Amazing. Now at 6:45 in the morning in Newburgh on July 25th, I would imagine it would be light out at that point.
I think it was. He comments on that in his original report, which I've just summarized here. Once our webmaster comes back from his escapades in Europe, we'll have all these reports posted to our website, and people will be able to read them. But I just thought your audience, both on the North American continent and everywhere else where people are listening, would welcome an opportunity to know about those reports a little bit early.
Oh, definitely, Peter. Thank you so much for this late-breaking news. As a matter of fact, you mentioned to me a little bit earlier that you get the feeling that something is building to a crescendo or something at this point. Is that what I heard?
My instincts are, yeah, you heard it correctly, Michael. My instincts are suggesting to me that the reports that I am getting today, the types of reports I'm getting, are significantly different from the reports I was getting just 5 or 6 years ago. They're much more dramatic. These objects appear to be showing themselves much more overtly, particularly if they're pedestrians that are aliens that are out walking around at 6:45 in the morning. That tells me that this is a great deal different from people seeing lights in the sky, which is the majority of reports that we used to receive, just unidentified lights in the sky. So I hope I'm wrong, frankly.
Yeah, I understand your trepidation there. Obviously, you are on the cutting edge of all the reports that come in from around the world to the National UFO Reporting Center. Let's tell folks at this point how they can find you on the internet, and if they have a report that they want to give you, how they contact you to do that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. If they would like to submit a report, whether it is a report from just a few minutes ago or a report of a sighting 8 decades ago, I'd like them to write it out with all the details they'd like to share with their reader, spell check it, and then they can copy and paste their typed statement into the description box of our online report form, which can be found on our website at ufocenter.com. That's UFOCENTER.com, and we will post their report. It's all anonymous. We never reveal who submitted the report. It's all anonymous, and we will post the report so the world can know about what they saw.
Yes, wonderful.
And
matter of fact, I would encourage... Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, if they've had a recent report and would like to call our UFO hotline, that telephone number in Seattle is area code 206-722-3000. 206-722-3000.
And that, of course, is the UFO hotline for the National UFO Reporting Center, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, I understand that number, 206-722-3000, is pretty much in every law enforcement office, front desk, and tower around the country as far as the FAA tower is concerned.
Probably in most of them, perhaps all of them. So if anybody calls 911 or calls the FAA, they will be given our telephone number, and they can call us and share their report with us.
Well, fantastic, Peter. Thank you for all your service. Let's just put it that way to the American public and the world in correlating and obtaining all of these reports and putting them out to the public. That's the important part. You You don't hoard this information. You get it out to people immediately as soon as you possibly can so that they can look it up themselves.